Hi, this is Gary Armstrong from Spintric Technologies. Preston and I are doing this, what we're calling Dry Sump 101, to better explain to people exactly why we do a dry sump system and what you accomplish and the reasons that we do it. Preston and I are going to attempt to make a video today we're going to call Dry Sump 101 because it seems like sometimes the basics of dry sumps and their function and operation is skipped, and I think it's important to start from the very basics and explain just exactly what is a dry sump and how does it work. And so basically, as far back as I have done lots of research on the subject since 1974 when we first started manufacturing dry sumps, the first ones came about at Alfa Romeo in Italy in 1906, I believe, and they were always done because in a conventional, what we call a wet sump system, where you're containing the oil inside the oil pan, the sloshing from cornering forces, even way back in the early days of racing cars, were pulling enough lateral G's to where you were sucking air in the pickup and losing oil pressure. Now this is just a conventional wet sump system where you only use one oil pump. The oil pump is used for sucking the oil out of the oil pan, pressurizing the engine, lubricating the parts, and then recreating the cycle. The difference between that type of a system and a dry sump system is you cannot have a dry sump system without a minimum of 2 oil pumps. You have to have one oil pump to provide pressure to the engine, and another oil pump to then suck the expelled oil, the lubricated oil, out of the oil pan and put it into the reservoir, which is where all dry sump systems have to have a remote reservoir for storing the oil. And that's the whole premise of the lateral G's of cornering forces. We can contain the oil in a separate baffled container with all kinds of different baffles like you see up here. Here's our typical tank baffle system. As you can see, when it's internal, it's very close clearances onto the baffles, and oil will fall down through the center, and under cornering forces the oil cannot slosh out, so it maintains solid oil supply to the pressure pump. And all of our tanks have different internal designs, but it's all for one thing: to keep the cornering forces focused on the solid oil at the bottom of the tank to supply the pressure pump. Now, the systems can also go, whether we're talking about a conventional dry sump system where we have generally a 4-stage pump, 1 pressure stage, and 3 scavenge stages, or a scavenge only type system where we're actually relying on the stock internal pump from the factory to pressurize the engine, in which case we would use like a 2 or 3-stage scavenge only pump. So it's no reason to be confused whether it's scavenge only or regulated pressure externally on the pump. It's still functioning exactly the same way as all dry sumps do. You have to have at least one oil pump taking the oil out of the oil pan, putting it into the tank, and one oil pump pressurizing the engine. But like I said, on all major racing engines today we generally use 3 scavenges and 1 pressure stage. Okay, moving forward on our Dry Sump 101, I wanted to explain a little bit about our scavenge screens that we build right into the fittings. These protect the scavenge pumps from any debris that's coming out of the bearing surfaces and whatnot inside the engine. So it just protects the pump. So in inline, rather than putting an inline filter, we actually build them right into the fittings. So that protects the scavenge pumps on the way back to the top of the tank. Now, on the pressure stage of the pump, where we're feeding pressurized oil back to the engine, we always want to run through our remote filter adapter. This takes I recommend a Wix racing filter, which has a very high internal bypass pressure, so every drop of your oil has to get filtered. And it also has a 1/8" pipe nipple on the front, so you can actually indicate mechanical pressure from this point right here, which is real bearing at the bearing pressure. So it makes for a nice, simple remote oil pressure gauge on the engine. Hello everybody. I want to invite you all to come and visit us at the PRI show in Indianapolis, December 8th, 9th, and 10th at the Convention Center in Indianapolis. See you there.